In the summer, 4 students from York St John University studying history embarked on a project with the York Castle Museum. Exploring some of the museum's collections and through research, they set out to reveal the stories behind the objects and the people who donated them.
My name's Amy, I'm from York Castle Museum, and I'm really pleased to meet you, and I really hope that you'll be able to help with a bit of research that we need doing for the museum. Now, we have lots and lots of objects at the museum, but sometimes the stories behind those objects are just as useful and as powerful. Now, this is Edward Timperley. In the 1940s, he donated 900 pieces of arms and armour to us. And we have this great picture of him visiting an exhibition in 1942 at the museum which displayed his collection. We don't know why he had 900 pieces of arms and armour, and we don't know why he thought he needed to donate them to the museum.
I decided to look at Edward Timperley because I have quite an interest in medieval arms and armour, and I'm focusing on that on my dissertation. The first part of my research, I'll probably look at going into the archives, try and find out as much as they have about him, and then sort of expand from there, looking at places like Ancestry, the National Archive. Then probably look at going to the York Library and look in their archives as well.
The second donor is Rachel Rostus, and I don't have a picture of Rachel, but I do have pictures of 2 of the 500 costumes she donated to the museum. This dress is from the 1920s, while this tunic is from the 1960s. Now, I'm not sure that Rachel would have worn all of these outfits herself, so why did she have 500? Who wore them, and why did she donate them to the museum?
I'm really interested in looking at the Rachel Rostus collection because it's a collection of costume and clothing dating from around the 1920s to the 1960s. So it'll be interesting to look at the social history of that time because it's such a changing period and how the objects fitted into the lives of that family.
Our third donor, I have a picture of as a child. Now, this is Mabel Smallfit, and she lived in York during the Victorian era. We know a lot about Mabel. We have lots of letters from her childhood. We know what school she went to, and she features in our exhibition on Kirkgate at the museum. And what we don't know about Mabel is what happened to her next, what she did during her adult life.
I want to take a closer look at Mabel Smallfit. We have a lot of information about her early life, but from what we know that she lived towards the end of the Victorian period and beyond, which probably means she lived through one of the world wars, possibly even both, and it'd be really interesting to sort of take a look at someone who lived through a period of such dramatic change.
Our final donor donated this beautiful teddy bear. Now, this is one of my favourite objects in the museum. He was found in a loft in a house in York. The house was owned by Alice Doherty, but that's as far as the information we have goes. And I'd really like to know how this teddy bear came to be in the Castle Museum.
It really touched me, like how such a treasured possession as a teddy bear would be left by such an old lady. So I want to look at her personal life and her family and why it eventually went into the museum.
After meeting with Amy, Grant met with Curator of History, Alison Bodley, to look at some of the objects from the Edward Timperley collection.
These are 2 of the armours that are from his collection. The first is a black armour from about 1644, and the other one it's a silver armour, but in armour terms we still call it a white armour. Timperley was an avid collector of swords as well. This is a late medieval one, and I think it's more likely used for ceremonial purposes. People used to proceed behind holding it upright. You can tell from the tassels that we've got on it that it is more kind of decorative. We do have some in the collection that would have been probably used for hand-to-hand fighting, but experts are kind of divided on its use. This one is a rapier, roughly in the 17th century, I think, and it's also got some leather interior on it, which we're not sure if that is the original leather. It's a basket hilt, which means that it was actually got some protection on it, so that when you're fighting, this part here would protect your hand. He was very proud of his donation, and the plaque was put up. So it was actually given in memory of his wife, And if we didn't have this collection now, we would be a lot poorer in terms of knowledge and items.
The plaque's a really nice sort of personal touch, I think, to how sort of people view their own things and how they view their own lives. It's really nice to see that he thought his collection was really worthwhile to have, and then in memory of his wife, that's really sort of nice and personal touch. Looking at the items today, it's really given me sort of an idea about who Timperley was as a person, that he had a really keen interest in collecting arms and armour.
Meanwhile, Isabel visited the stores to meet with Em from the Castle Museum to look at some of the costumes owned by Rachel Rostus.
The Wallace Rostus collection was donated in the late 1970s and early 1980s by Rachel Rostus. What she donated was a wonderful archive of clothing that dates back to the 19th century. It's 4 generations of the Wallace and Rostus families. Here we've got one of the dresses that Rachel wore when she was a child. It has some lovely hand embroidery on, it's made of red crepe, and it has these wonderful little beads down the front. Amy, Rachel's mother, made a lot of her clothing for her, and we suspect that she may well have had a hand in this one.
Being behind the scenes in a costume store is what I'm interested in doing. Getting a chance to see the different garments from all eras has been really, really interesting.
In his bid to find out more information about Mabel Smallfit, Ben has arranged to meet with assistant curator Lucy Knock on Kirkgate.
Mabel Smallfit was born in York in 1890, and she was born to local York people, her mother and father, Joseph and Ada. They lived on Fulford Main Street for the early part of Mabel's life, and Mabel went to the local Fishergate board school, which was one of the city's new free schools.
You have some stuff here that belonged to Mabel. Could you sort of tell me a bit more about it?
This is her actual certificate of attendance, so something that she would have valued highly. And we've actually got quite a few of these for most of the years that she attended Fishergate School.
Why have you got so much stuff that belonged to Mabel?
Mabel donated quite a few of her items, treasured possessions really, I suppose you'd call them. She lived very close to the museum, and I think it was probably held as quite a dear place in her heart.
Do you have any idea where I could sort of start looking for more information about Mabel?
Yes, we do actually have more material on Mabel in a store off-site, so away from the museum. You can go and have a look at the items we've got there.
Back in the museum stores, Emily's been busy looking through the museum's archives and has located Alice Doherty's bear.
We found the bear in question, which she donated back in 1992. And we've also found separate files and index cards detailing further things that she's donated to the museum. Within the files themselves, we've got birth and death certificates, which give us details on her father and her mother, her father working as an exhibition attendant, which makes me feel like that's the reason why she's donated these, possibly to follow in her father's footsteps. I'm also hoping to meet with Denise, who was the woman who the bear was given to when it was first brought into the museum.
Local records and newspapers are held at York Explore Library.
We're at the City Archives in York Library and been following a lead to finding out more about Mabel Smallfit. And we've actually come across her obituary in the Yorkshire Evening Express. We found out that she was awarded an honour, which was the British Empire Medal for doing savings work. There was a government initiative after the Second World War to try and get communities to save, and she managed to save £20,000. And she was given this award in 1969, so that's a lot of money back then that she's managed to save.
Today I've been at the York Library Archives, and I've been looking at some microfilm footage of some articles that were written about Timperley's collection, as well as some pamphlets that they've got on record that he wrote when the collection was first put on display. The archives here really offer us a unique insight as to what people thought about the collection at the time. I've managed to find out that he was a schoolmaster in London, but apart from that it's been really hard to try and glean any more information about him. So it'll be having to spend a little bit more time and maybe towards London area and try and get it that way.
To find out more about Rachel's life, Isabel is looking through the records held at the museum's store.
We managed to find letters and the Ascension Register, so we found all the clothing that she's been donated. We managed to find that Rachel was a member of RIBA, which is the Institute of British Architects, and for a woman at that time it's quite unconventional. Well, through research we managed to trace back up to 4 generations of the same family, so it's been really interesting looking at clothing from more recent years, so like the 1980s back to the 1870s. It's a mixture of handmade clothing made by the family themselves and also things from specific dressmakers, so quite exclusive clothing. It's really interesting to look because you can see clothing that was made for Rachel and clothes that she made for her own daughters. There was an exhibition called Lifestyles in the 1980s which showcased fashion from an identity point of view, so how clothing was shaped. The Castle Museum decided to showcase the Wallace-Rostos collection, and clothing that Rachel actually wore was shown during that time, so she would wear things in summer and then in autumn when she didn't wear them she'd send them up, and then in autumn she'd request the summer dresses back again. To see the clothing in particular and how they can be personal, and to think that they actually chose them and made them and maybe were even complimented wearing them, it's really, really interesting.
Today, Emily's meeting with Denise at the museum.
I've been looking at the bear donated by Alice Doherty, and I understand that you were here on the day that the bear was brought into the museum.
Yes, I was very fortunate. I was working at reception on the day, and this middle-aged lady came in with a little package, and she said, "Are you still taking donations?" And I said, "Yes, we are." And she unwrapped this little teddy bear, which also had a letter with it as well, and it had such a lovely story with it.
It would be really nice if we could actually see the letter and have a look at that, because that's something new that we haven't seen before.
Here we are.
Oh wow, this is amazing. It's so nice to see something that's so treasured by someone. To the person who cleans the house out, will you please see my teddy bear goes to the children's part of the Castle Museum. I have given them a few things, so I'm sure they can find a corner for him. I have had him since 1914, a present from my dad when he went to the war. I would hate to think he might get into one's hands who would eventually tear him up. Thank you, whoever you may be. Miss Alice Doherty.
To discover the reason why Edward Timperley donated his collection, Grant's looking through the records.
Today I've been at the York Museum's Trust stores, and I've been looking through their archives and trying to find out more about what they know about Edward Timperley. I've also found a folder that contains some pictures of him and a letter that was donated with his collection. And it really details who he was as a person towards his armour, and more importantly how he felt the museum should use his armour and why he donated that armour. I feel really good about the project, yeah. It's been quite a journey to look at sort of a man's life and how his joy of collecting armour has really progressed and then changed into what in the York Castle Museum today.
By complete accident, Ben's made an amazing discovery.
I've actually managed to come across some letters addressed to her from a relative who was in the First World War. When we were looking through some boxes, Grant found a lead which led us to another box which actually turned out to have some First World War items in it, and these included some letters to Mabel Smoffett from her, what we think is her cousin Harry. I'm assuming this because they share a grandparent. In the letters there are actually apologies for any delay in writing back, so I'm assuming this correspondence was very regular. No doubt you have been wondering why I've not written before this. The fact is, we've been very busy with the wounded. Have you heard anything from George and Frank lately? I heard from one of the old York lads out there, and that they had gone to Mesopotamia. Is that right? What sort of weather have you been having in York? It's beastly hot out here. No, tell Dad I have not got any souvenirs or any money from Friday. I've had plenty of chances, but I don't want anything from the blighters. I've got the sight of them, it's enough to give one nightmares. And as for souvenirs, I've been far too busy dodging his shells. At the start, Mabel was just this little girl with a bicycle in a photo with rather austere-looking parents. And now you've found something that's very, very close to her heart and sort of has quite clear emotional ties, and she's kept these letters addressed to her from this relative. They obviously mean a lot to her. Most of these are from 1917 to 1918, so they're very near 100 years old. The research has actually been quite challenging. The most information we actually have on her, aside from the letters, is actually when she died.
It's been quite challenging, but very exciting at times as well, when we found letters or other pieces of information within the stores or archives.
Well, making the project's been really interesting. At parts it's been kind of difficult to do research because the data protection prevents you from finding out recent information about people.
It's been a real eye-opening experience for me on this project to sort of look at how it is to work with a museum, as well as how to go about research as well. It's been really interesting.